Facebook Live button, Alan. All right, you are on deck here. You are live. All right, hey, Alan's fan club. I'm going to do this, all right? I'm not trying to be the creepy kid from The Shining. I'm trying to demonstrate what Alan and I want you to do to help him share the message. You're going to hover over the share button and start doing this, okay? You can do it more than once. I had a guest on here a couple of weeks ago, Alan, and he was in the educational field, and he had some critics in that field because he had a pretty high-profile position. And so he has like a kind of online person that we wouldn't really necessarily, I don't know if it's a friend or foe or what, but that person was really a friend because shared it to like 90 education-related Facebook groups. So I'll also say trolls, haters, go ahead and share this Facebook Live with Alan. Is that fair to say, Alan?
Absolutely.
It's fair game for everybody. All right.
Go two-handed if you need to.
Yeah, two-handed. Two-handed. You have 10 fingers. Do a little piano technique where you hover on the one button and do like a Franz Liszt number right there. I think we're pretty much ready to go. If you can give me a 5 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Alan.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Alan.
I'm going to crank you up just a titch here. Right there. If you give me another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Alan.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Alan.
Alan. All right. Major Tom. All right. Here we go. Ground control. All right. Alan P. Brown. At this point in the interview, when I get to like 7 or 8 in a row, as opposed to the cumulative, sometimes the brain, I've noticed the brain gets a little bit fuzzy, but we've done the audio, we've done the bio. I'm pronouncing everything okay. We're on Facebook Live, and we're about 15 minutes behind schedule, so we're going to dive right in. Alan, are you ready?
I am ready.
We are live in 3, 2. We are live with Alan P. Brown. Alan, are you ready to talk?
Born ready to talk.
A productivity coach and host of CrusherTV.com, Alan P. Brown teaches productivity hacks to crazy busy professionals and entrepreneurs. Alan is also an internationally recognized speaker and the #1 best-selling author of, you've probably heard of this book too, Zen and the Art of Productivity. Alan P. Brown, welcome to the talk.
Great to be here with you, Nathan.
Your talk is called Undiagnosed in Millions. Do you have it? It's a reveal talk, and there's all kinds of really valuable stuff, not just about that piece of the talk, but you really get into our system of incarceration, particularly in the United States, mention how other more forward-thinking countries are starting to reform their system to make it more humane, but undiagnosed, do we have it? What is it that we have?
So I will take the same tack I took in giving the actual talk, which is to share some statistics about this thing before I tell you what this thing is. So I'm going to tell you about a thing that up to 71% of all alcoholics, I think it's 45% of the prison population, and about 25% of the drug abusers in the world all have in common. This is something that affects 9 million adults in the U.S. alone, and it's evenly distributed around the world, about the same percentage of adult populations. Results in billions of dollars in increased medical and justice system costs, billions more in reduced personal productivity and business productivity. It's responsible for untold social, familial, personal misery in every single day for many people. And importantly, in women, this thing results in increased odds of eating disorders, a doubling in the likelihood of attempted suicide, and more. And this is neither a particular crime nor a demographic. This thing of which I speak is ADHD in adults, attention deficit disorder. And so I hope for those who didn't know what it was going in, that you have a little bit of an eye-popping going on. This is, we all think about the out-of-control kid who's bouncing off the walls. It is either needs to be medicated or is over-medicated, and there's a lot of controversy around that. But I, again, am talking just about adults who number 9 million in the U.S. alone. And the important thing about, and the reason I gave this talk, is that 85% of those 9 million don't know that they have it.
What's to say? I've been asked point blank whether I have it, and I don't know myself, Alan, just because of, I wonder why that would be. A lot of different ideas and a lot of different energy. And so I love that you're framing this as an adult issue and acknowledging some of the controversy, the overprescription, and all of the stuff that we know that is going on. So we're just Talk Universe. We're just kind of framing it in that way. Let's talk about you, Alan. When did you know that this was something that you were dealing with, and what was your backstory like as it relates to this?
Yeah, and this is another reason why this talk was so important for me to be able to deliver this talk. And that is because I was undiagnosed for most of my life, and that resulted early on in, of course, suboptimal academic performance, but also because I was a I was not a super severe case, but I was a classic case of attention deficit without the hyperactivity, but my mind just couldn't stop going. And such ADD teens and adults seek risk-taking behavior. They have difficulty with their studies. They have difficulty doing things like renewing their insurance. And they are likely, for a number of reasons I won't get into, to gravitate toward more risky friends and, again, behaviors. And so what I ended up doing as an undiagnosed teen and then into my 20s is I self-medicated with alcohol, with drugs, where many of my other friends in my cohort were starting to kind of grow up and go off to college or go off and find a trade or a profession. I just sort of languished, and it took me 10 years to get a 4-year degree, and in that time, I became a drug addict because the only thing that would fire up my brain enough to be able to do the schoolwork in college was cocaine and speed. So I ended up trying to be a drug dealer to put myself through college, ended up becoming addicted. My grades were going up, but I was becoming more and more and more of a drug addict. Now, here's why this dovetails with the criminal justice system. So here I am. I'm actually a pretty good guy. I did engage in some crime, but it was not violent crime. And of course, I was a criminal because I was dealing drugs. But I was really trying to just get through college and go on and start a career and be a contributing citizen. But here I am doing this illegal thing, going from Jersey City to Harlem several times a week to buy large scale amounts of cocaine. And had I gotten caught doing that, I would have been thrown in prison. Had I, for instance, got caught with some of these drugs on me, as was the case almost all the time, with my uninsured car, my unregistered car, my expired license, which is all due to my ADHD. I didn't know how to run my life. Again, I could have taken a very different path in my life. And to kind of wrap up this section here, this is why it's so important for us to support prison reform and justice system reform, because there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of nonviolent criminals who are in jail because of extreme drug laws, and also the non-screening of people coming into the system for mental health issues, ADHD, and other things that may have been not an excuse, but an explanation for why it is that they were using drugs, abusing drugs, etc.
What is what's your take on some of the reform efforts that are happening in other countries as well as in the United States? We're starting to get on the bandwagon a little bit. It's a little bit less polarized than it used to be. What's your take on where that's headed, and what's one thing that perhaps here at the United States that states could implement with very little maybe risk or controversy that would make a big difference from the perspective of humane correction laws?
Yep. At first, and as you mentioned, and thanks for mentioning it, and I mentioned it in the talk, a number of countries, including countries in the UK and Northern Europe, are now screening for ADHD and other mental health issues among their prison populations so that they can direct them to more of a treatment rather than correction path. And as a result, they're seeing reduced recidivism. Now, we have one of the worst recidivism rates in the world, our country. It's because we don't really correct people in our correction system. We are strictly punishing them. Yes, there are many programs that can be available to people, but we're not doing a great job of it. The good news, bad news of our current situation in the U.S. is, the good news is, as you point out, that the conversation about drug law, nonviolent imprisonment and convictions we're starting to get a little bit more rational about it. On the other side, and this is something we have to really watch out for, is the privatization of prisons. Because when you have the profit motive behind keeping people in prison, you're not going to have reform of these things. So we're doing well on the one front. We're starting to break through some old beliefs and some, frankly, destructive laws and traditions, but we're also at risk of handing things off to private companies that are really not going to be serving society at large.
We've been enjoying this conversation all over the place, appropriately, with Alan P. Brown. His talk is called Undiagnosed in Millions. Do You Have It? It's about undiagnosed adult ADHD. We're talking about prison reform. We're talking about his own backstory, which is a very interesting story. Really, these issues really come down to stories, and that's why we talk behind the talk. And we're going to be back pivoting over to you, Talk Universe, for the Blitz Round in just a moment. And we're back with Alan P. Brown. It is time for the Blitz Round, where I am about to ask Alan a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent branded talk. Alan, are you ready?
I am ready.
Were you selected to speak, or did you apply?
I applied.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I am a memorizer. If I didn't have that thing memorized, I would have gone off in 53 different directions.
That's one of those questions. How did that serve you? Were you able to stick with the script pretty well?
I was. And again, it's a good thing that I knew that I was a memorizer and I stuck with it.
Well, so you walk out on stage. Did you have nerves? Were you in the zone? Neither or both?
I was definitely in the zone, and you know what? The funniest thing is that I still use Ritalin. I was prescribed Ritalin at the age of 36. That's when I first got my ADHD treated. It changed my life dramatically. My career went from this to that. I know this is a lightning round, so I'll brief this up. But I showed up the day of the TED Talk having forgotten my Ritalin. So I was really scared that my brain was going to fall apart, but I got psyched up, a little bit of caffeine, and boom, no nerves. I was just so in the zone, and it really helps when you are passionate about your talk. I think my passion really drove my perfect performance in the talk.
Okay, so other than the caffeine, if you forget the Ritalin, what's a tip, technique, or a tool that helps you?
Absolutely. Consider physical priming, breathing, get that chest, get that sternum up. There's a great piece of research that says that when your sternum is down here by 2 millimeters, there's a world of difference in what happens up here when you lift it just 2 millimeters.
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 Yes, millimeters. When your sternum is up here, it changes your body chemistry. Do some of that. Do a power pose. And it's a little bit controversial, but do a power pose before you go out on stage, and you will be increasing the odds of your being able to deliver a great talk.
Amy Cuddy's power pose is controversial?
There was one of her researchers a couple of years ago did an op-ed where she basically tore down the results, or really the methodology of that study. And I had already been a proponent of power poses. I waited for Amy Cuddy's response to that, and I felt she did a great job of responding to it. And so I believe that power poses are something that are okay to talk about, but some people have heard about the refutation of it. It still stands in my mind.
Yeah, well, it works for me too, and it worked for Wonder Woman, and it can work for you too, Talk Universe. I am pro power pose, and Alan is too. So we're going to enjoy this this talk with Alan P. Brown. We've been enjoying the Blitz round, and his talk is called Undiagnosed in Millions. Do you have it? You're going to be able to watch the talk by typing it into Google, or you can go to our show notes page at bethetalk.com. We will have a link for it that is clickable that you can watch very easily, and you can connect, as I mentioned in the bio, with Alan at crushertv.com. Crushertv.com. We'll have a link in there as well. And in a moment, we'll be back with Alan P. Brown and his final word of advice to you, Talk Universe. And we're back with Alan P. Brown. It is time for the final word of advice.
Recognize that your brain is its own thing and has its own life. Think about it like the engine in your car. You don't take care of the engine by polishing it like you do your fenders and your leather seats. You have to take care of that thing from the inside. And the more you recognize that your brain has its own life and needs to be fed with the right food, the right amount of sleep, and the right amount of exercise, you're going to be able to nail your talk and nail a whole lot of other stuff in your life much better. Feed your brain.
Alan P. Brown, thanks so much for carving time out of your busy schedule to give your wisdom to Talk Universe today.
Thank you, Nathan.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much. And we're still on Facebook Live here, so if you have a question or comment for Alan, we're going to go offline, but you can still ask your comment or ask your question or post your comment. And remember the finger share. Blast this. If you have a loved one that's been incarcerated, and any of these stories that we told, so many different things, Alan, that we talked about. If anything kind of dovetails, or if you're just curious and you want to spread that message a little bit more, share it. This is why we do this.
And think about this: if you know one person who's been in your life that's been diagnosed with ADHD, there are probably 6 more that you know who are undiagnosed with ADHD. And that's really important, because when someone gets a diagnosis of ADHD, even if they're 72 years old, it is life-changing when you start to realize how your brain works uniquely and why it is you may have had difficulty in school or in a job or whatever. So that's another important reason to click that share button.
All right, Alan and I, we're signing off, Talk Universe.